Thank you very much for joining me, Ciaran. How have you been?
Not so bad, John. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay, straight into it. My first question, before you kind of put it to rest, I was very concerned about doing anything on sorry, not on Bloody Sunday, but on Soldier F's upcoming trial. Um, Given that it's a nightmare scenario to possibly be the guy who got him off the hook or who ruined the time when he finally goes to trial. So please, yeah, you're the legal mind. You might tell us why it is that it's okay for us to speak about it.
Yes, we could do that because the court that Soldier F will be tried in is a diplomat court. I'm sure you've heard of those before. It is a court whereby the judge sits as both judge and a notional jury himself. Therefore, the normal sub judice issues that would arise, whereby if there was a potential jury, don't, because I mean a judge is expected to be able to put and does put all those matters outside of out of his mind when he sits as both judge and jury. So, I mean, there's not much that hasn't been said about Bloody Sunday and the content of the various reports and the evidence over the years. You're on pretty safe ground. But if Mr. Justice Fowler happens to be watching this podcast and he feels that there might be an issue, Judge, this will be the time to switch off now until the trial's over.
Okay, yeah, we're not going to name him. His name is out there. In theory, if we were to name him, would we get into legal trouble? I'm not. We're not.
Yeah, you would indeed. You would indeed. Um, Soldier F enjoys an order of anonymity. Um, Now, notwithstanding that, I'm sure that there isn't an adult in Derry who doesn't know his name. His name's widely known, and in fact, his name is known before he even left Glenfarra Park, because his name was called out by a colleague, and his name was actually published in the Irish press within days, and a letter which was sent by a priest whose evidence we'll be looking at later, Father Terence O'Keefe, wrote to Harry Tuzo, the General Officer commanding for the British Army, in relation to the conduct of Soldier F, and his name was published in the in the public domain. But in 1972, Lord Widgery allowed all, almost all, the military witnesses, with the exception of the senior officers, such as Major, Colonel Derek Wilford, Major General Robert Ford, um, etc., Colonel Harry Diesel Payne, they didn't get anonymity, but Soldier F and all the soldiers who opened fire were given letters. So that's why you'll see in the evidence soldiers A, B, C, D, etc. Those soldiers are soldiers who fired shots on Bloody Sunday. The soldiers who you see in the evidence as simply having a number, so like for example, soldier 17 soldier 229, soldier INQ, and then a number. Those are soldiers who have received anonymity, because it was deemed to be a risk in relation to their identities being known. Notwithstanding the fact that in 1972 and throughout the Troubles, Corporal Jones would have been giving evidence in Belfast Crown Court or Derry Magistrates Court day and daily, as would members of the RUC. But Soldier F first received his anonymity in 1972. Then, when that order ran up as far as the Bloody Sunday inquiry, which started in 1998, and and then he only had partial anonymity relating to his surname because there were evidential issues relating to his first name. And he only anonymity was only attached to his surname for those proceedings, but in respect of the current proceedings, which is his criminal prosecution, that anonymity order, and we challenged it as lawyers for the families. That anonymity order relates to his both his Christian name and his family name, his surname. So yes, you would get into difficulties, contempt of court, if you were to um, uh, broadcast or publish it in any way.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the two inquiries that have happened at Widgery, and Saville will speak about his actual upcoming trial in September. But just to put
Yeah.
all this into context, the reason we even know about this fella called Soldier F is because of his actions on that terrible day that we call Bloody Sunday in January 72. So you might go through for us, if you could take us through his actions, the shots we know he took, whatever you can tell us about what he did that day. Bearing in mind that we've had these two inquiries, so we can pull from forensic reports and ballistics and so on. So yeah, t take us through what he did that day, if you could.
Yeah. Well, firstly, the reason how I know about this is that my name's Ciaran Shiels, and I'm a solicitor for the for almost all the families and wounded, and I have been since 1998. Um, um, March 1998, I started work on this case, on and off. I was a prominent solicitor during the Bloody Sunday inquiry, which ran up until 2000 2004, in terms of oral hearings, and reported eventually then in June 2010. So we just had the 15th anniversary of the Saville report. That was an inquiry with three judges of international standing, one English law lord, one a judge from New Zealand. He retired, and an Australian took his place, and then another judge from Canada. For the first time in British legal history, heard again the evidence, and effectively a second tribunal was held into a matter of urgent public importance, which was Bloody Sunday, and that was primarily because the first inquiry, which was set up in the immediate aftermath of Bloody Sunday by Lord Widgery. It's now a very infamous inquiry now. It was a very short and fast affair. It was wrapped up in about, I think, 8 weeks, and the tribunal report, it's about that thin. You would cover it easily within an hour, and it's generally viewed as being a whitewash. The guilty were found innocent, and the victims of the parachute regiment were found guilty, and the Civil Rights Association was blamed for essentially for the bloodbath and having an illegal march, and the soldiers were exonerated. Uh, the closest that inquiry came to was in the area of Glenfadda Park, which is where Soldier F um, was the most prominent soldier, and the firing in that area was described as bordering on the reckless. Now, the evidence that was collected and gathered by the Bloody Sunday inquiry was an altogether different affair. It was a serious inquiry. It lasted many years. It it probably didn't need to have lasted as long as it did. It's been criticised for its cost. But I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that that inquiry was as unexhaustive an effort to get to the truth, and every single shot, every single incident was gone into in amazing detail. Um, uh, and The reason why, of course, there was so much evidence and it did take so long was because so many people were there and so many people witnessed it. It was Bloody Sunday was brazen, in the sense that it was carried out in the full uh, in the glare of the world's media. It was photographed, it was filmed, it was audio recorded. The events were bugged in terms of the all radio transmissions from a local radio ham, a man called Porter, who sold radios. The communications into and out of the local RUC barracks, Victoria Barracks, were also bugged, but by the provisional IRA. Um, uh, there were literally thousands of witnesses to see, and I mean, I myself I mean, our firm, Madden Finucane, in addition to representing the families and the wounded, represented about and brought in about 500 witnesses to the inquiry, and there were other firms of solicitors who had respectable amounts of witnesses also, who were brought to the inquiry. Not to mention the firms of the lawyers in England who represented the soldiers, who were all retired pretty much by that stage, and were therefore private citizens. And there were generally three or four main firms of solicitors who would have been involved in representing those soldiers. The same went for members of the media, same went for members of Civil Rights Association, went for members of the provisional and official IRA. They all had their solicitors. Um, Probably something that's important just to point out is that in the last inquiry, the Attorney General issued an assurance in respect of self-incrimination, whereby, and in order to encourage witnesses to get to the truth, um, if they told the truth, and that involved in making admissions to serious criminal offences, like, for example, IRA membership, possession of firearms, explosives, um, for paratroopers, admissions of murder, attempted murder, grievous bodily harm, wounding, perjury, um, robbery, um, assaults. Or if a soldier or an IRA volunteer, or any person whose evidence would necessarily, if they were to tell the full truth, involve making admissions to criminality, and that the assurance was there that there was the whatever admissions you made would never be used in a prosecution against you. So ironically, had Soldier F decided to tell the truth about what he did on Bloody Sunday, he never would be sitting in the situation where he is now, because he could not have been prosecuted for one of his murders, or his attempted murders. And therein lies the irony of where we are. Now, for example, if Soldier H was to say, I did, I did whatever I did, but I also saw Soldier F shoot through several civilians without justification. They clearly were unarmed, and we concocted our statements in order to cover that up and conceal our conduct. That potentially could that evidence could potentially be used as an account to initiate a prosecution. But one seriously doubts if people would have been interested in prosecutions if the the truth had been told. But as regards Soldier F, well, what we know about him is that he joined the parachute regiment in the late 60s. It's a cadet. He completed, he must have been one of the first British soldiers to come into the North, I'm assuming in August 69, um, uh, due to the Battle of the Bauxite in Derry and the serious violence that erupted in Belfast. And he served uh, an emergency 4-month tour which concluded in around the end of 69, start of 70. Towards the end of 1970, he commenced a 2-year tour under the 39th Infantry Brigade, which covers Belfast. The 39th Infantry Brigade covers Belfast, the 5th Infantry Brigade covers Armagh, and the 8th Infantry Brigade covers Derry. Those would be the three British Army Brigade areas in the north. The Derry British Army Brigade was commanded on Bloody Sunday by a Brigadier Pat McClellan, and in Belfast it was a Brigadier Frank Kitson, who I'm sure you've heard of, and maybe you've watched the recent. Uh, Say Nothing. A character features. He features in that also, characterization of him. But the one para were stationed in Palace Barracks. They were a notorious regiment. They were the reserve battalion, which supported all the other resident battalions in the 39th Infantry Brigade area. So they would come in, for example, in support of the Coldstream Guards or the King's Regiment or whoever it happened to be in a particular area of the city. Um, they were a notorious regiment in Belfast for their um, they were seen as shock troops. Who were not best suited to um, supporting basically policing, which is what they were, which was the role that they were put into, in aid of the civil power. Um, Before he came to Derry on Bloody Sunday, he admitted that he fired his weapon on a number of occasions in Belfast before. Uh, he he was asked to what extent did he fire his weapon, and he said like 3 round, 4 round, 5 round exchanges, nothing more than that, and that he had never killed anyone until he came to Derry. He hadn't taken another person's life. He was part of support company of one para. One para had uh, A, B, C, and D companies, which were regular infantry. companies. But there was also Soldier F's company where he was a lance corporal by the time he came to Derry, and he was within support company. He was a lance corporal in the anti-tank platoon. Now, support company, if you're wondering what that does, the clues in the name, it supports. It gives aid to the ordinary infantry soldier. They specialise in, there's a machine gun platoon, which is a mortar platoon, and that type of warfare. And there's the anti-tank platoon, which specialises in anti-tank warfare. That was F's platoon, and there also was a separate, much larger platoon of about 36 men called Composite Platoon or Guinness Force, and they also are a relevant um, uh, section of support company for Bloody Sunday purposes. But for Bloody Sunday purposes, the main platoons which caused the damage were mortar platoon in the first instance, commanded by an individual known as Lieutenant N. They admit to firing 42 shots. Support company admit to firing in total 108 shots on Bloody Sunday. The rest of the shots are accounted for by the anti-tank platoon and by Guinness Force, the composite platoon, which was made up basically of older soldiers. Say, for example, soldiers with maybe 10 years experience, who may have other roles, for example, in pay corps or uh, cooks, for example, but fully trained, highly trained paratroopers nonetheless. As I said, I suppose it may be for soldiers who are coming to the end of their service and going on to other forms of employment, so they get to getting training and qualifications in that regard. Um, we know that Soldier F played a significant role in the uh, post-internment uh, violence in Belfast. Um, as you know, it was Operation Demetrius was the operation whereby on the 9th of August, the and internment effectively began, and I think between 300 and 400 Catholics and nationalists were arrested and interned without trial. Uh, Obviously seen as an entirely one-sided operation in relation to the community, but you'll obviously be well familiar with the Ballymurphy massacre, and the findings in relation to that important inquest, which came subsequent to the Bloody Sunday inquiry. I think over the first 4 years of the uh, conflict, the army had certainly had primacy over the RUC. And RUC officers, for example, if there had been shooting incidents, would not question the military. It was not there was an unlawful agreement, which was an operation which was between the general officer commanding British Army Harry Tuzo and the then assistant chief constable of the RUC, Graham Shillington, and the agreement was to the effect that the Royal Military Police would question members of the military after significant in engagements or in circumstances where live rounds were fired or um, allegations, for example, were made against were made against the army, and for those for that for the course of that 4 years, really criminality flourished um, in terms of British Army uh, atrocities on lethal force incidents in Belfast and Derry to a lesser extent. Um, it was permitted because they there were no murder investigations in relation to any of the lethal force incidents that took place. The parachute regiment, in particular, were given cause to know that they could act with impunity. Um, After internment, um, they killed 11 civilians, as you know, in Ballymurphy. Other regiments of the British Army were involved in killings such as Desi Beatty and Seamus Cusack and Derry, Kathleen Thompson in Derry, which was another significant inquest that's just reported. And all of the evidence from the British Army was collected by the Royal Military Police, who were effectively the soldiers were not cautioned, for example. They were taken and statements were taken in circumstances which were innately sympathetic to the individual soldier. There was extensive submissions during the Bloody Sunday inquiry about how this agreement uh, spawned wholesale collusive behaviours between the Royal Military Police and soldiers who were involved in taking life in the north. Over that period, uh, 187 civilians, that 4 year period, were killed by the British Army. Not one soldier was arrested. Not one soldier was charged or faced prosecution in relation to any of those killings. Yeah, it's pretty stark looking back on it from this distance that not in not one single case did any criminal charges arise. Now, at that time, there were British soldiers, for example, in the parachute regiment, coming before the courts here. Like, I mean, for example, there was a notorious paratrooper, Costas Georgiou, who later went on to uh, have particular infamy in Angola in 1976. He was a member of one para, and he was a notorious soldier. And a couple of days before Bloody Sunday, he and a few other um, parachute regiment soldiers armed themselves with Sterling submachine guns and robbed the post office in Bangor, netting £84 or something of a loot, and all those soldiers were charged. I think they received periods of imprisonment of 4 years. So, instances like that would be investigated and prosecuted. But when it came to shootings, uh, and circumstance, or for example, there was an infamous case involving the parachute regiment and a woman called Emma Groves in Belfast, who before, and this was again before Bloody Sunday, where I think she had a Republican record playing on a record player, and a soldier from C Company, I believe, of one para, fired a rubber bullet into her face through a window at point blank range, and her eyes were so badly damaged that they had to be removed. But I mean, there's footage of that. it's easily enough obtainable. I think it's on YouTube, etc. Um, there was a formulaic way of beating or making sure that a soldier would not uh, be charged. One sees it, the more statements of the Royal Military Police that one reads, where I've acted in accordance with the yellow card. Um, this yellow card is given to every soldier. They carry it in their the soldiers refer to it colloquially as a politician's card. And I think Scantler card was given to it, but if you concluded in your statement that on patrol in the Cregan estate, I saw a gunman. He pointed his weapon at me on a nail bomber, had a lit nail bomb, and his arm was back like that. When he was ready to throw the fizzing object, or the gunman with the pistol had it pointed in my direction, I heard three low velocity reports, and in response, I fired two aim shots at the individual. He was seen to fall. Other associates of his came forward and retrieved the weapon, and uh, everybody essentially were armed gunmen, nail bombers, acid bombers, petrol bombers, and persons alleged to have been involved in terrorist behaviour. So it's a very formulaic um, uh, manner in which the Royal Military Police statements um, read. They almost if basically if soldiers were supposed soldiers knew if they stuck to that tried and tested formula, they would never see the inside of a criminal court. At least certainly for anything arising out of that first 4.5 years. Many would argue for the entire Troubles, but certainly for that first number of years of the Troubles, that culture manifested itself, and many people would say it was a culture of mendacity, whereby soldiers knew what to say and they stuck to it, and there was this understanding that they were effectively licensed, and that nothing really happened to them. Normally these incidents would happen in ones and twos casualties. Ballymurphy was a bit different, but it was still spread over 3 nights. Some of it was happened in fields. Most of it wasn't photographed or filmed or recorded. Then they just had the statements of the residents, uh, who could speak of those who were killed, and the type of people that they were, and that they would never have been armed, or one was a priest, etc. But of course, there were still 9 civilians dead, and including a priest, Father Hugh Mullen, by the end of it. But again, the statements for in respect of Ballymurphy all follow that same formula. In terms of events coming up to Bloody Sunday, the significant events are apart from Ballymurphy, the blinding of Emma Groves, a number of individual incidents in Belfast. There were allegations that one para in particular were engaged in planting of ammunition in Republicans' houses in order to justify them being interned. They featured in that, but In Derry was an area which the one para had never been, and the people in Derry had really no experience in respect of how to deal with them or what they should do if they come into their area at speed. The whole nature of the parachute regiment is that it is built on aggression and speed of movement. If you look at any of the interviews with paras, that they will all tell you that. So whereas the people in Belfast, if they would see the maroon berets uh, from one para, they know to run. They know not to be on the street when when they come. Whereas the uh, civilians in the no-go area of the Craig and the Bogside and the Brandywell, when they would see the uh, berets or the parachute regiment soldier wears a distinctive type of smock. If you ever see it, they're different from all the other, and also with a different type of helmet at the time from the other regiments, and they would generally wear their flak jacket inside the para smock, and it would tend to give them a bigger appearance, more fearsome appearance than the other soldiers. But really, Derry people hadn't experienced them until a week before Bloody Sunday at McGilligan Strand, when a civil rights association, another band, Civil Rights Association anti-internment march was scheduled to take place, because McGilligan is now a prison, but it's like Category C prison now. But in those days, it was a camp where many internees were kept. They weren't just kept in. Some were kept on the Maidstone prison ship, some were kept in Long Kesh, and then others were kept nearby Derry and at McGilligan. The photographs and footage of McGilligan, then the violence that was exhibited there tells its own story. There's footage there of a para using his SLR battle rifle as a club on and demonstrators. There are demonstrators who were chased into the sea. They were demonstrators who were shot at point blank range with rubber bullets, and in one particular case, a paratrooper appeared to and this was filmed and broadcast at the time. A paratrooper who was beating a civil rights protester, and he was beating him to the extent that a para NCO or junior officer, I can't just quite remember which, but the footage is there, actually had to start to batten his own soldier to get him to stop attacking the civil rights demonstrators. Such was the frenzy that he'd worked himself into. None of these incidents gave rise to army inquiries about conduct of this regiment. Uh, a number of more liberal journalists were starting to write articles about one para and their activities. In particular, the Daily Telegraph's Nigel Wade. He wrote an article in which which he saw the marchers being driven into the sea, um, and he witnessed the use of the rubber bullet guns being fired point blank in circumstances where the marchers didn't have, stones to even to throw back, given that they were on a beach. But the two very prominent journalists, Simon Winchester and Simon Hoggart, wrote an article in the Guardian, whereby they reported that two of the regiments in Belfast had requested let the one para not be brought into their areas because the local regiments were left in a situation whereby they had to effectively reap the whirlwind that would be caused after the paras did what they were best known for. Um, During the Bloody Sunday inquiry, we had minutes of political meetings at the highest level disclosed to us. The the parliamentary there was a Whitehall committee called Gen 47, which would meet once a week to discuss matters relating to the North. And nowhere at that meeting was there any cause or concern expressed about the pictures of one para um, uh, and the controversy that came out of McGilligan Strand. There is a documentary that I was doing some preparation for this, John, and I came across a documentary which shows the paras who were interviewed the week after uh, the Ballymurphy killings, which they are interviewed, and it can be found on YouTube. I'll give you I'll give you the link details in case you know you want to put them up for your viewers. But I would definitely commend anybody who wants to who's interested in this subject to look at it. But the paras who admit to having shot and killed people in Belfast are interviewed. They talk about the circumstances in which they've done it. They some of their attitudes to the local population are quite shocking. Um, they talk about it was great getting rounds finally let off and things like that. Um, quite really pretty. They're an insight into and this program, of course, was broadcast, the BBC had no problem releasing it at the time, but I would definitely commend it to anyone. So really, by the time Soldier F came to the streets of Derry, I think that it's fair to say that the soldiers themselves felt licensed to inflict damage. They could act with impunity. I think that it's fair to say that following two visits to Derry, the commander of land forces, uh, Robert Ford, had come to the city. He had uh, met with local traders. He had inspected the local battalions. He was not impressed with what he saw. He The other regiments would be referred to by parachute soldiers as crap hat regiments. They one can see generally like with the paras or the Royal Marine Commando regiments that there is a certain disdain for other regiments within the within the British Army, and they have this name for them, crap hats, and the local regiments in Derry were very concerned about what they had seen at McGilligan, and when news about obviously had um, started to report about this massively advertised march to be held in Derry on the 30th of January for anti-internment organised by the Civil Rights Association, that the IRA were being approached to stay away to give the Civil Rights Association their day, um, and that there were rumours abound that the paras were being brought to Derry in order to deal with this march. And the local commanders, and in fact, the local commander of the RUC in Derry, Frank Lagan, all went to Brigadier Pat McClellan and said, "This is a very bad idea, bringing these particular soldiers to Derry." And there's extensive evidence given in relation to uh, that. That issue before the Bloody Sunday inquiry. Not so much with the Wizard inquiry, because the terms of reference of that inquiry was to keep somebody within the hour or so of the march when it reached the Bogside. But certainly within Lord Saville's inquiry, it extensive evidence was given, and the whole gravamen of that evidence was local commanders did not want them here. And when parachute regiment soldiers, when they were making their statements, obviously the statement takers would ask them, "Well, what was your impression of Derry? Why did you think you were being brought up there?" They invariably would say, "Well, they didn't know how to deal with rioters. They stood with shields. They always went back. They never went forward. They behaved like Aunt Sally's," was the term given to them by Lieutenant Colonel Wilford. And they believed that they were being brought to Derry not just to teach the Derry rioters a lesson, and the Derry rioters were really costing the British Exchequer much, much more than the IRA, where the Strand Road traders were saying, "Look, this area of the Bogside is extending and extending and extending, and there's street after street being burnt because the Bogside runs under the city centre in Derry." And they were basically the local traders association met General Ford, and they said, like, "Look, our concern here isn't so much the IRA, it's the riots in the city, and how the rioters are not ever firmly dealt with." And General Ford agreed with them. I mean, he prepared a memo, quite a chilling memo, and said that we're now coming to the stage where we have to consider the use of .22 uh, uh, rebarreled SLRs. So they would take a less powerful round than the 7.62 millimeter round that the battle rifle would need, the NATO round that the battle rifle would normally fire. And he gave orders for 30 of these such rifles to be prepared for Derry, so that the concern was that if one was shooting a rioter, that the 7.62 round wouldn't go through the rioter and kill an uninvolved innocent person who happened to be behind that rioter, and there are memos to that effect, two memos in particular, and that really, I think, is a fair summary of what the circumstances were before the march, what Soldier F was really coming up to here. The Paras themselves were given to think that they were coming into the IRA's own backyard, that the Roswell Flats and the Bogside was a haven of IRA snipers. In fact, the truth was that it was not. It was not an area that was used for sniping, because it was compromised by the hill, which there were various army observation posts in the Craigan area, which could cover one side of the Roswell Flats, and the army observation points on the city walls and on the embassy building, which would compromise the rest of it. The Roswell Flats was not an area which was often used for sniping operations by the IRA. Areas such as the Craigan, the outskirts of the Craigan, and the outskirts of the Brandywell, or shots being fired at Blease Lane Army Camp, were much more regular targets of both wings of the IRA, but the Paras definitely were given to understand that coming into this area, this office is actually on the edge of the bog side, actually at what's known as Agro Corner, where most of the riots at that time would commence, and certainly they believed that they were coming into a place which had not really been invaded, as it were, for 2 years. So that's sort of us up to the point, like, where Bloody Sunday's just about to start. John
Just take us through like the actual actions of F
F,
and
no problem.
where his bullets ended up and so on.
When the first shots were fired at 3:55 p.m., just here in William Street, the shots were fired at an old bakery, which was manned by 9 members of the machine gun platoon on Bloody Sunday. They shot, they claimed to have fired at two nail bombers. They opened fire instead on a 59-year-old man, the oldest person to be hit on Bloody Sunday. His name is John Johnson, and a 16-year-old boy called Damien Donaghy, who was a very promising footballer at the time. He was signed for an English club. He was shot, and a number of rubber bullets had been fired from the burnt out bakery where this para platoon were deployed, and as was the custom in this area, young people would usually pick up rubber bullets. They were something, they were souvenirs. They were sold to American tourists. They formed, many's an ornament and many's a fireplace locally in local houses. But as he went forward to pick up the rubber bullet, he was shot in the leg. Mr. Johnson was shot in the shoulder and in the chest. Now, at that time, the anti-tank platoon was deployed in the grounds of the GPO and the local Presbyterian church at Little James Street. And that's where all of support company were before coming into the Bogside. C company would, and on the footage that one normally sort of famous footage where at the riot, there are rubber bullets getting fired, there's sheets of tin being pulled out into the streets. Those soldiers that are here engaged in that are members of the Second Oil Green Jackets and one Paris C Company. No Paris and C Company shot anybody. All of the shooting and all of the casualties that were incurred on Bloody Sunday were carried out by support company. After those two individuals were shot, a member of the official IRA fired a one round from a 303 rifle, a snipe back at the paras who were positioned in the area of the Presbyterian Church and the GPO, and the shot um, cracked open a drain pipe, and on the and in relation to one sees, for example, in the films about that have been made about Bloody Sunday, or if anybody has read into it, this drain pipe shot, was given a particular prominence, especially in 1972 at the British Inquiry, because they were saying like, oh, the drain pipe shot, well, that proves that the IRA are in the area, that that was one aimed at us. Um, uh, also, there is the separate theory. Well, certainly it is correct that that was a shot that was fired and it was aimed at the soldiers there, but it was fired because of the shooting of the old man and the young boy who were taken into a local masonette, and Lord Saville found conclusively that the Paris fired first. It, insofar as that's really relevant to what takes place 15 minutes later. but I thought I should just cover that with you first. 10 minutes later, the rioters who had been rioting in William Street and in Little James's Street, the rioting starts to peter out. Um, Much of the rioting, it was a pretty feeble riot by Derry standards, and and it was rubber bullets had been fired, CS gas had been fired, water cannon had been used. It was January. People were soaked with purple dye. Obviously, I think the thinking behind it is that the purple dye would easily delineate, rioters to arrest for the snack squads when they would come in. The parents were concerned that so many people were drifting down Roswell Street to where the rally was to take place, where Lord Fenner Brockway, and Ivan Cooper, and Bernadette Devlin, and McCann were all due to speak, that there were really not going to be all that many rioters or people close to rioting. I mean, uh, certainly in the city, for every 10 rioters, there are normally 20 or 30, what they call rubberneckers, who would be standing watching the riot. But even in terms of scooping up people, observers of the riot, those numbers were depleting fast. And Colonel Wilford looked at driving a Humber pig through the walls at the GPO, but they realised that the sides of the wall were not of the same level, and that the Paris would have to come in straight by a convoy of traffic from Little James Street right up and into the waste ground at the back of the Roswell Flats and on Roswell Street itself. And that advance of the by the Paris, it can be seen on telly footage of the soldiers actually going in. Now, the first two pigs turn in. Those are filled by members of the mortar platoon. They debus the pigs. They arrest 6 people on the waste ground. Um, the operation orders the name of the order for Bloody Sunday was called Operation Forecast. Operation Forecast is a concoction. It talks about arresting 300 to 400 rioters on Bloody Sunday. However, as we will come to deal with the arrests later, which Soldier F is an integral part of, they didn't even have the uh, measures in place to process 20 rioters, let alone 300 to 400. It's a certainly the submission of the families was is a total concoction. Um, the mortar platoon go into the rear of the Roswell Flats. The first shots fired by Lieutenant N down a street known as Chamberlain Street. That sound of that gunshot um, go straight through Chamberlain Street and into the vortex of the Roswell Flats. There's a bit like the Davis Flats in Belfast. There are 3 blocks to the Roswell Flats, and the soldiers open fire on the civilians who are running through that area trying to get away, and the first person who they shoot is Jackie Duddy. And he is shot through the right shoulder, and the bullet exits his left upper chest. And it's Bishop Daly, Father Edward Daly, later to be Bishop Daly, running beside him. The young boy laughs at seeing the priest, etc. And he's hit by a mortar platoon round, and he skids onto his face. And another 4 people are shot in the area of the Roswell Flats. There's a woman called Peggy Derry. She's shot in the back of the leg, or she's shot in the leg. The bullet exits the back of her leg, and she is very, very seriously wounded indeed. A man called Michael Bridge loses the run of himself, and he starts going to the Paras in a rage, shoot me, shoot me. And so Sergeant Doe, standing at his peg, gives him immediate satisfaction and shoots him in the leg. And Mr. Bridge hops off, and he and Peggy Deere are taken to the same house. At the same time, a man called Mickey Bradley also seems to who's a neighbour of Jackie Tutty, uh, becomes distressed and starts throwing stones at the soldiers, and he's shot, and the bullet goes through both arms and his chest, but he survives. And finally, a man called Patrick McDade is wounded between the shoulder blades. It was believed by a 7.62 round, but the Bloody Sunday inquiry concluded that it was more likely a rubber bullet, potentially a doctored rubber bullet, that inflicted the injury that he suffered. I can send you a photograph of that, John. On Roswell Street, soldiers F, G, H, and E, and J, and P, and 017 all take position around a low wall at Kells Walk, which faces down southwards down Roswell Street towards along on the other side of the street from the first block of the Roswell Flats. And the site before them would have been a rubble barricade, which would have been there certainly since about 1970, and was had now largely been rubble, kids kids playing on it that had become trampled down, etc. And I mean, it was a rubble barricade. Now, another soldier from the mortar platoon, soldier U, was positioned across the street and also looking down at that barricade. Now, the scene at the barricade was that there were about 30 persons present at that barricade. Uh, none of whom were armed. None of there were no. You should take it that there were no petrol bombs thrown on Bloody Sunday. There were no nail bombs thrown on Bloody Sunday. A number of sporadic shots were fired at the paratroopers on Bloody Sunday. A couple of shots were fired from a handgun after Jackie Duddy was shot by a member of the official ARA. Father Edward Daly and others spotted the gunman, and they very angrily told him to get out of the area in case he would get them shot. And the Paras did not even notice those rounds being fired at them. Nowhere on the rubble barricade or inside Glenfada Park, which is where F will shortly go, were any shots fired at them, or any missiles fired at them, nor were there any explosions or anything of that nature. And Lord Saville, having looked at this matter in extreme detail, concluded that there was no fire or explosions or anything like that. So we're just going to clear that up just at the start. Within a minute of these soldiers taking position at the low wall, soldier soldier F would open fire with his SLR, and he would shoot a young boy called Michael Kelly in the abdomen. Um, that Michael Kelly is photographed um, just before he is shot, and then and one can see that he's not engaged in any sort of activity, any kind of aggressive activity. He's looking up at up at the Paris. Um, Michael Kelly was a 17-year old who was at technical college in Belfast, came from a large family in the Craigan area. His family, very close knit family. His mother in particular took the events of Bloody Sunday very, very bad and would often be found on winter nights with a blanket out trying to keep his grave warm. She was driven uh, to very, very extreme grief over the loss of her son. Michael is the first person who is shot at the rubble barricade. After he is shot and he goes down, Private U opens fire on the rubble barricade from the corner end of Block 1 of the Roswell Flats, and he shoots a young boy called Hugh Gilmore. And the bullets go through the one round. Sorry, the one round goes through his arm and through his both sides of his trunk, causing a very grave injury. And he manages to stagger to the end of the block, whereby uh, he effectively dies in the arms of a young girl there, and he's tended to by local people. As Michael Kelly is on the ground and he is lifted to the gable end of Glenfada Park, uh, Soldier P, who is beside Soldier F, discharges 9 rounds at the rubble barricade, and he shoots 3 young people: Michael McDade, uh, William Young, Michael McDade, John Young, and William Nash, killing all 3 of them. William Nash's father, Alexander Nash, is at the gable end of the Roswell Flats, the gable end of Glenfarra Park, and he goes out to his son, and he's tending to his son, and he's waving at the parachute regiment soldiers, and he also is shot through the arm. Soldier E, F, G, and H form what is known as a brick. I don't know, you probably come across it before. A brick within a platoon, is a four-person unit, and within the brick there is a buddy. Each person has a buddy. It's a buddy system. Now, the NCO in charge of Soldier Lance Corporal F's brick is an individual known as Corporal E. He is deceased. Um, the lieutenant who is in charge of the anti-tank platoon is known as 119, and another soldier gave evidence to the Bloody Sunday inquiry that this officer sat down with his platoon and said, we're going down, we have to teach these buggers a lesson, and we want to get some kills tomorrow. Now, that was denied by 119. You'll not be surprised to hear, but that four-man unit departs the low wall at Kells Walk and starts to run down towards the entry to go into the square of Glenfarra Park North. As the members of the anti-tank platoon run forward to Glenfarra Park North, their position is taken up by the members of the composite platoon, the composite platoon, or Guinness Force, as it's known. At this time, there's a young boy and another 17-year-old, Hugh Gilmore, 17 also, but a young boy called Kevin McElhinney who's left by himself at the rubble barricade. And there's a very, very heavy expenditure of rounds towards that rubble barricade, and there are three very young men lying dead dead or dying at the rubble barricade, and Mr. Nash Senior is there with us, who he's lying on his son, and he's been shot through the arm. So the 17-year-old Kevin McElhinney starts to crawl from the rubble barricade to the door of the Roswell Flats, and this is all the while being watched by the individuals who are at Glenfarra Park North, who will soon come into contact with Soldier F. And they include Father Dennis Bradley, Father, as he then was, Terence O'Keefe, who was the Dean of Humanities at the University of Ulster, and about 20 to 25 other Derry civilians. Now, as E, F, G, and H are running to go into Glenfarra Park North, K, L, and M of the composite platoon are, well, L and M certainly are taking shots at Kevin McElhinney as he's crawling on his stomach to get away from them. The civilians attest to seeing sparks bouncing off the ground and blue flashes off the ground where the bullets are striking around Kevin as he's crawling for the door. Then Sergeant K, who was the champion uh, target. He held the championship for marksmanship at Bisley for a number of years before Bloody Sunday, and he came up, fired one shot from his SLR, and then immediately put the safe bag on it, having shot Kevin through the buttock, and the bullet fragmented off his pelvis and caused catastrophic injuries the whole way up his side. Um, I think it's telling that he then put his SLR safety back on, which tells me that they are not under threat. They are not being fired upon. They are not being bombed. If you read their statement, you would think that some of these soldiers are advancing up Roswell Street as if they were going over the top at the Somme or at Passchendaele or at some great glorious um, British Army battle. That was certainly not the case on Bloody Sunday. But in any event, K put the safety back on his weapon, and that's the only round he fires all day. As E, F, G, and H go into Glenfarra Park North, they come upon the scene of the crowd who are carrying young Michael Kelly, who's the first person to be shot at the rubble barricade, and Michael's being carried through the bottom end, the most southern end of Glenfarra Park North, towards a gap which leads to Abbey Park. The Paras open fire. The significant thing about the Paras who open fire on the civilians at Glenfarra Park North is that every civilian there has an entry wound, uh, and the trajectory of that round goes from right to left, as if they're running. They're all running in the same direction towards the um, uh, entry, which leads into a place called Abbey Park. Well, and that was seen as a place of potential safety at the time. And there are dozens of civilians trying to cram through that small entry to get through, and then that Abbey Park, it's like a crush almost. Jim Ray, who had been conducting a sit-down protest, not like a non-violent sit-down protest earlier at the rioting in William Street, is hit and goes down half on, half off the pavement. I will send you a photograph which shows the scene in Glenfarra Park after uh, this initial burst of gunfire from EFG and H. But behind him, a young boy, a 16-year-old, whom I represent, um, called Joe Mahan, is struck from right to left in the pelvis, and he's very badly wounded. Behind him is a young man called McKinney, who was a compositor in the local Derry Journal um, newspaper. He had taken a study film with him. He had filmed events both at the Rubble Barrack. He filmed events at McGilligan Strand the week before, and he had also filmed up until he was shot. Um, the Bloody Sunday March until the trouble started. He is hit twice and is shot dead. Now, at this stage, Soldier F moves towards the gable wall where the two priests, Father Bradley and Father Terence O'Keefe, are dealing with approximately 20 other people. And some of them are hysterical at having witnessed the murder of Kevin Michael Hinney as he crawled to the Roswell Flats door, where the bullets are bouncing around him as he's crawling. A shot is fired, and it strikes 41-year-old, I think as he was then, Patsy O'Donnell in the shoulder. He is shot separate to the fellas who are all hit right to left. He's on the other side. He's on the other side of um the square. Soldier G approaches Jim Ray's body, and he goes to move up, and having already been shot in the back, he is shot twice more in the back by Soldier G. Soldier G then proceeds through that alleyway into Abbey Park, whereupon he is met by a man who is 35 years of age, and I believe he has 7 children. His name is Jerry McKinney, and he puts his hands up, says "Don't shoot," and he is shot through both armpits with his hands in the air, and he's not injured in any way. He then shoots, possibly as a shoot through, but a young boy called Gerard Donaghy, and a round is later found in Gerard Donaghy's spine, an SLR round, which is sent for examination at the Forensic Science Laboratory. Soldier G comes back into Glenfarra Park, and he calls over to Soldier F, and he says his first name, and he goes, "I've got another one. I've got another one." And Soldier F at this stage takes charge of the prisoners, which include the two priests at the gable end. He rifle butts both of them. He sees that there is a commotion going on across the street at the bottom of block one of the Roswell flats, and he opens fire with his SLR, and he shoots and wounds two people, um, Danny McGowan and uh, Patrick Campbell. Above these people is a man called Patrick Doherty who is trying to crawl to freedom or safety, and he is shot eventually through it's in what was called a Texas headshot. He was shot through um through his, essentially through his hips, and the bullet runs up, severing vena cava, etc., and causing catastrophic injuries. Now that man kept saying he didn't want to die in his own. He didn't want to die in his own, and he was calling out. And by the way, he was married with a wife and young family. At the same time, Barney McGuigan, who is 41 years of age, he's married. I think he has six of a family's two sons and four daughters, if I remember right. If I've got it wrong, I'm sure I'll hear from them. Um, they their father goes out because he hears Patrick Doherty saying he doesn't want to die on his own. He doesn't want to die on his own, and he takes a hanky with him and he goes out. And Soldier F is still sitting on his one knee at the same part of basically at the entry from Russell Street to Glenfella Park, and he fires a round which enters the back of his head behind his ear and exits the front of his head and eye, and if he effectively blows the man's head off, so to speak. That concludes the civilians who were hit by gunfire. What happened next was that Soldier F E H 119, the radio operator who is 027, who later turns informant on the Paris, all start arresting the civilians who had been just simply doing nothing except cower at the low wall. Sorry, at the gable wall, and they begin to bring these prisoners up northwards towards William Street and the command post. Not before leaving Roswell Street does Soldier F fire additional rounds, and in that he tries to kill a photographer called Fulvio Grimaldi from Italy, and he expends six shots through the flat living room window, um, and luckily Fulvio and his wife, then so called Susan North, English woman, who acted for both of them, they escape unscathed, and those would be the casualties um, inflicted by Soldier F that afternoon. Now, what I would propose to do now is to take you through what he says he opened fire at very briefly, and how that account changes.
You're going to go into more, but just to bring it back to the case for a second, how many did Soldier F shoot, and how many is he being tried for? Because they're not the same figure.
No, not at all. Soldier F shot, certainly shot um, dead Michael Kelly at the rubble barricade. He is not charged with Michael Kelly's murder. He shot um, Jim Ray and William William McKinney in Glenfarra Park. Now, um, Jim Ray was shot in the back, but then shot twice again in the back. Uh, it's believed by Soldier G, who would be Soldier F's um, buddy, as it were, and and they were very, very close friends. Soldier F is charged with those two murders. Those are the only two murders that he is charged with. He is also charged with the attempted murders of the young people who were running to try and get through to Abbey Park. So he's charged with Joe Friel, Michael Quinn, who are all hit right to left. He's charged with the attempted murder of Joe Mahan, who lay between Jim Ray and William McKinney. Joe Mahan is the witness who hears Private G come back and say from Abbey Park, after finishing off Jim Ray on the ground from a distance of about 18 inches, he hears him go back and he says Soldier F's first name, and he says, "I've got another one." When Soldier F goes down on one knee, when he is at the gable end of Glenfarra Park North and fires into the area south of the Roswell Flats, the Bloody Sunday Tribunal said, "We are sure that he shot um, Bernard McGuigan and Patrick Doherty, and we are sure that neither man presented any form of threat to him when they were shot. We also believe, we also believe that he was responsible for the shootings of Patrick Campbell and Daniel McGowan, who were seriously wounded in that area, but who survived. He is not charged with the murder of Paddy Doherty, Bernard McGuigan, or the two woundings, Campbell and McGowan. He then returns to um, Roswell Street at the pig and goes to his Humber pig, and he claims to have been uh, under fire or threatened by a gunman in the first block of the Roswell Flats, and he put six shots, or he is among a group of soldiers who put six shots in through the living room window of an apartment on the flats, and that's where Fulvio Grimaldi, the Italian photojournalist, is, and he is not charged with Fulvio's attempted murder either. So he really faces charges relating solely to what occurs inside of Glenfarra Park North. He isn't even charged on a joint enterprise basis with the other killings, for example, on the Rubble Barricade. He's not sure, or the other killings on uh, in Abbey Park, and he's not charged on a joint enterprise basis with any of the shootings, the shooting of Jackie Duddy and the wounding of the four other people at the rear of the Roswell flats. Similarly, the other two killings in Roswell Street of Hugh Gilmore and Kevin McElhinney, he has escaped charges there also on a joint enterprise basis. So, John, really what you see is he's charged with a fraction of what he was actually involved in that day. Um, what he's, I mean, I'm dealing with this very much in broad brush strokes here for the purposes of a podcast. But in relation to Soldier F, what he said was, and his account changes radically. I'm going to do this very quickly. Um, but he gave two statements in the early hours of the 31st of January at Fort George. And what he told the Royal Military Police was that there were 200 rioters in Roswell Street when he got there. He saw rifle fire expended at them, but not the gunman. He saw two nail bombs explode in Roswell Street, and I mean, I don't know if you've ever been, you know, if you've ever heard a nail bomb or an IED explode, but they're extremely loud, and the expert reports were actually obtained in relation to a phenomenon in Derry called the Derry noise, whereby because Derry's in a valley at the river at the on either bank of the River Foyle, and it's something that the soldiers, both soldiers and soldiers who have served here and civilians alike, refer to as the Derry noise, whereby the noise will travel up the river. And I mean, a bomb exploding in Roswell Street, even like a 1 pound type device, like a nail bomb with a stick of gelignite or Gelimex or Frangex or gelatin or Quarex or any of those types of explosives which were used at the time with nails taped around it. People in Craigan would think that the bomb the small bomb had went off because of the river and the way in which the sound travels up the foil. Um, but nothing like that was picked up on any of the audio that was recording any of by any of the film crews or Susan North or anything like that. So he says 200 riders he saw. There were in fact a group of about 30. And two nail bombs he saw explode. He doesn't say he fired a shot in Roswell Street in his first statement. He then sees riflemen leave the rubble barricade and exit towards the gable wall of Glenfarra Park North. And he says that when he and G pursue them into pursue them into Glenfarra Park North, he sees um, uh, he sees at a window in the flats, on the second floor, a gunman, and he fires three aim shots at a sniper. He then, once he's inside Glenfarra Park, he sees a nail bomber in the process of throwing a nail bomb, which, although fizzing, does not explode, and he fires two aim shots at him. He then arrests his prisoners. He goes back to Roswell Street, and he fires eight aim shots at various gunmen in the Roswell flats. Now, what he says then on the 19th of February is radically different to what um, he initially has told the Royal Military Police. And by this stage, he has the benefit of a colonel called Colonel Colin Overbury of Army Legal Services, who's brought over to uh, represent him effectively in his statement, with, but you see, this statement isn't being made to the Royal Military Police. This this statement is being made to, but it's not. He's not cautioned or anything before it. But this statement is being made to a member of the Treasury Solicitors Department who were tasked with collecting the information for the Wizardry inquiry. What he says now is radically different to what he said less than 3 weeks before. He says when he arrives at the wall, he observes a number of people at the barricade. One of them was attempting to throw what looked like a nail bomb in his hand. It was fizzing. I have seen nail bombs before, and I am in no doubt that this was one. I fired one aim shot and he fell. The bomb did not explode. I don't know what happened to it. Then I saw the three men leave the rubble barricade. One was carrying the rifle, and they moved to the right to the direction of Glenfarra Park North. Now, pausing there, the reason why F says that he opened fire and shot a person dead, and he has a trajectory photograph which points exactly to where young Michael Kelly fell, and we know that from the from the photographs taken by Robert White. The reason why he does that is because 2 days previously to the 19th of February, on the 17th of February, at the Forensic Science Laboratory in Fasani, Carrickfergus, there's a startling finding made where, because two of the deceased had um, bullet heads removed from their bodies, because of the power. You remember I mentioned to you earlier about General Ford looking to rebarrel some of these SLR rifles to make them into capable of firing 2.2 ammunition to shoot the rider, but not the rider behind. In all the other cases, we're talking about through and through wounds, of the deceased and the wounded, exits, exit wounds, as well as obviously the entry, the entry wound, such as the power of the SLR, and the round that it discharges. Now, the reason for that startling difference, is because F's bullet is found in Michael Kelly's spine, and Michael Kelly has not been accounted for in any of the accounts from the parish. And this is where it all starts to unravel. Um, Michael Kelly, there's no doubt that he's shot where he's shot, because he's photographed before and after he's shot, like seconds. There also isn't any doubt that he's unarmed, and there was nobody else shot there. So we can't be talking about a mistaken identity either. Now, he then goes into Glenfarra Park, but jettisoned is the story about the gunman who he aims the three aim shots at. He now goes into Glenfarra Park North, and he fires two shots at a nail bomber. He then asks G to cover him as he hears pistol shots in the direction of the Roswell Flats. Now, he's never heard pistol shots coming in the direction of the Roswell Flats in his previous accounts. So, so he goes to where the prisoners are, that he's soon going to arrest, and he's soon going to arrest, in particular, a man called Father Terence O'Keefe, who I touched upon earlier. Well, he says he observes a pistol man just south of the Roswell Flats, and he gets down on one knee, and he fires two aim shots at him. But even that does not cover all of the casualties that are south of the Roswell Flats, because we know, and they are photographed because, thankfully, this is the difference between Derry and Ballymurphy and Spring Hill and most of these other places. There was that the world's media were there and they were able to photograph these things in real time. Barry McGuigan sustains the horrific head injury when F shoots him in the back of the head, and he's going to Patrick Doherty's aid because he's saying he doesn't want to die on his own. But in addition to those two individuals, we also have McGowan and Campbell haven't been arrested. Sorry, haven't been shot and seriously wounded there. He then takes his prisoners, take, escorts them. He says escorts them. The prisoners have a different account of how they were moved from Glenfadda Park North up to Roswell Street and to William Street, where they were beaten into soft 4-ton Bedford soft-skinned lorries. But he then says that he fires 3 rounds at the Roswell Flats at a gun where he sees a gunman. He then moves to the other side of his jeep and he fires 3 more rounds at a rifleman, and then finally he fires 2 shots at a new gunman that he's never had before, who's up on the roof suicidally, I should say, of the Roswell Flats because he's totally exposed from the city walls. He's totally exposed from uh, uh, the observation post at Murderer's Corner. He's exposed yet again from uh, Blease Lane Army Camp, and he's exposed at the Army snipers situated up near St. Colum's Cathedral. But being the fact that this is probably his first day in Derry, he may not know all that. Um, Now, Colonel Overbury is with him when he makes this statement, and he realizes that this does not marry up handsomely at all with the statements that were made um, back on the 31st of January in the early hours. And his reasons for that are as follows. He says, I'm for the differences are as follows. I made 2 statements on the 31st of January 1972 regarding the events of the 30th of January 1972. These statements were taken in the early hours of the morning. And furthermore, this was my first operation in this area. Having seen aerial photographs of the area, I now realise that some of the positions I gave in these statements were not accurate. I am now satisfied that I have a clear understanding of the positions I took up that afternoon. I also made a statement in which I said I was reasonably sure I shot a person whose photograph was shown to me called Donaghy. I stated that I shot this person at Glenfadda Park. Having seen further photographs of Donaghy, I still feel I'm reasonably satisfied this is the person I shot because he bears a close resemblance. But of course, he didn't shoot Jared Donaghy. His best mate, Private G, shot Jared Donaghy. And just as the 17th of February was a pretty significant and unpleasant date for Soldier F, it was almost in all fours with the type of day that Soldier G was going to have vis-a-vis the evidence that he was going to put forward to Lord Ridgway's tribunal. Now, all of these alarming issues do not give rise to any police investigation, to any Royal Military Police investigation, and and when I went through those cases earlier, and when I was setting out just how high a level of uh, uh, impunity that the soldiers knew that they enjoyed. Hopefully, you're starting to get a flavour of that. Soldier G's bullet was found almost at an almost identical wound to Michael Kelly's, and his round is also found in the spine, just as Michael Kelly's was found in his spine. but Jared Donaghy's spine had Soldier G's um, rifle. Sorry, bullet that was forensically traced to his rifle. Um, bad enough as this is for Soldier G. These two individuals aren't even shot in Glenfarre Park. Soldier Soldier G shoots these two people in Abbey Park after he goes through the entry at the bottom of Glenfarre Park. Immediately after he finishes off Jim Ray on the ground from the distance of 18 inches. So those are the accounts. Now Soldier G is dead, and Soldier G was dead in 19 or in 2020, sorry, 2002, for example, when Soldier F was last giving his oral evidence to the Saville Inquiry. Now, amongst the group, amongst the group who were arrested at the low wall in Glenfarre Park North was the priest Terence O'Keefe. Now, his day will forever be entwined with the activities of Soldier um, F. What Father O'Keefe wrote a letter to General Tuzo about his experiences that day, about the circumstances in which he was arrested, and also in relation to what he saw. Now, what he says he saw is very different to Soldier F. Now, what he says is that um, this is as he's at that gable end. I heard the shots immediately after they adopted their firing positions. He's talking about the Paris at the low wall. He says one young man at the barrier fell, holding his stomach, and four fellows that were standing where I was uh, at Glenfarre Park gable ran out and quickly um, grabbed his body and brought it back to the gable end. That's Michael Kelly that he's speaking of. I think this youth died there, and Father Bradley attended to him, giving him spiritual assistance. I looked round at the barricade, and now there were three bodies lying behind it. They were face downwards, and one older man had fallen and on top of the bodies. Those three bodies were lying very still. The older man, he was still alive, and he was saying one of the bodies was his son. And he was putting his hand in the air, and as he was signaling towards us, but we could not go out to him. He's obviously attesting to Alex Nash, who goes out to his son William, and John Young, um, Michael McDade, and William are effectively lying on top of each other, having all been shot by Corporal P, who was initially beside Soldier F. He says that Soldier um, he says he talks about a young boy pulling himself along the ground and sparks striking the ground just in front of him and behind him. This is Kevin McElhinney as he's crawling to the door of the Roswell Flats. He twitched. He nevertheless managed to get inside the doorway. He died inside that doorway. He said, although we were too afraid to go out, we gave them spiritual absolution from the gable end. He said four young fellows tried to make a quick dash for it across the courtyard of Glenfarre Park. A crowd stopped one youth from going by holding on to him. This is the crowd where he was trying to prevent the youth from running across because it was just simply too dangerous. The other three fellows just fell at the courtyard, and there were more shots. All three of them fell. They fell forward, and they fell hard. There was one of them with his body halfway on and halfway off the pavement, which runs at the side of the masonettes. Again, I am certain these young fellows weren't carrying any arms, and they were uh, rounding in a direction which seemed to be to get away from the troops. When they fell, I heard the noise of shots, which appeared to be coming from Colmkill Court. That's the position north ahead of him. So the person who's halfway on and halfway off the pavement is clearly Jim Ray, and the other two boys are William McKinney and Joe Mahan. So it's a very different picture to what is depicted by Soldier F. Now, what Father O'Keefe depicts then is his treatment by Soldier F. Both priests are rifle butted. Both priests are punched, kicked, as are all the other civilians on their journey up to Bedford 4-ton lorries, and they are taken off to a military uh, base known as Fort George, and that's where the arrestees on Bloody Sunday are taken. There are about 50 people who are taken to Fort George. Now, what he talks about is um, he says he was he was kicked onto the Bedford Fort Hunter. He says the account that follows is that of an eyewitness and a sufferer. There's nothing in this letter. This is a letter to General Tuzo. He says I personally witnessed all of this, and I should add that any injuries I received have been medically attested by the university doctor. Given this person is the Dean of Humanities and a university um, lecturer, he was not wearing his clerical garb on Bloody Sunday. But he says that um, he was placed against the wall of a masonette, having been struck several times in the process. I saw many people being savagely beaten by your troops for no apparent reason. I then was taken in a line of civilians to the foot of Roswell Street. I was forced to run with my hands on my head while soldiers who were beside us um, beat us for no apparent reason. We were rifle butted in a systematic way. Um, there were 29 people in the lorry, 28 males and one female. One soldier came to the foot of the lorry. He loaded a baton round and said, I want you first in half that space." So we were forced to kneel facing the front of the lorry. The woman present was told to be quiet by one soldier waving a baton at her. He spoke to her in the following terms: "If you don't shut your fucking mouth, you'll be eating soft food for a fucking month." He says that when we arrived at Strand Road, I, along with the others, was kicked from the lorry and forced to run between two lines of paratroopers wielding batons, hoses, and rifles. Each soldier struck a blow at me as I ran to the door, and most of these blows connected. We were then forced to stand for several hours in a search position against the walls. Anyone who shifted position was threatened and at times beaten. We were told to put our hands on barbed wire and then to hold our hands behind our heads or to stand in a search position and in an unnatural position against the wall for long periods of time. At around 8 p.m., a senior officer from the regiment in charge of us, who was the Coldstream Guards, ordered chairs and electric heaters to be brought into the room. It had been excessively cold during this whole period. At about 9 p.m., soldiers from the parachute regiment returned, and each soldier selected 3 or 4 persons for the purposes of identifying them as stone throwers. I myself saw a young boy of about 13 years of age and a badly injured middle-aged man were not selected by anyone. We remained on the chairs while the paratroopers lined their prisoners against the wall to await photographic photographs, interviews and to speak to the RUC. It was during this period that I witnessed conduct that was both sickeningly brutal and a disgrace to any uniform. Assaults were committed in a sadistic manner on a number of panic-stricken youths aged from about 15 to 19 years old. These assaults continued over a period of 1 to 2 hours. They consisted of deliberate and systematic provocation of the prisoners by the paratroopers by verbal means and by physical assaults such as stamping on their feet, kicking their shins, kneeing them on their thighs or in the groin, severe hair pulling, striking with fists in the body, stomach, and groin, etc. Such actions occurred continuously over this period. Two, more serious examples of physical assaults took place. One youth at the age of about 16 or 17 was struck on the groin and the lower abdomen twice with such severity that he collapsed. On being kicked and hauled to the feet, he was unable to stand and he fell backwards and struck his head on the concrete floor. He was kicked to his feet again and he had to be placed against the wall in order to keep him upright. I do recall that the RAMP told Lance Corporal F, he provides his full name, and the paratrooper with the blonde hair, who I remember clearly as even having the sadistic edge on Lance Corporal F, that they should not hit people in custody. Now, Soldier G had striking blonde hair. I do not think, however, that the other soldiers were as sadistic or as casually brutal as the paratrooper with the blonde hair or Lance Corporal F. I recall that the Derry boys were talking back to them as well. They said that they were ordered to stay in a particular position, and they were struck if they shifted position. The smaller youth was forced to stand on the taller youth's feet during this time in order to raise his face nearer the blow heater. The blow heaters were being used to burn the prisoners. One youth fainted. He was asked if he wanted a drink. He replied, yes, he did. And he was told to open his mouth. The paratrooper then spat into his mouth. I should add several points to the above account. Many of those detained with me had bad injuries, mostly to the head and the face. Most were said to have been inflicted on them by members of the parachute regiment during their arrest and their journey to the army centre. The physical assaults continued during the period of identification and photographing in the period in a lane. Sorry, it's bad quality. It's so old a letter. But he said he witnessed one assault being carried out by an RUC sergeant, and he said what sickened him and disgusted him most during the 7.5 hours he was in their custody was the fact that during the assaults and torturing of the defenceless young prisoners, they were without exception smiling in obvious sadistic enjoyment of their actions. And Soldier F is pictured with Father O'Keefe, and we've supplied you with the photographs of Soldier F and the four persons that he claimed to have witnessed rioting. Now, one of those individuals is called Pat Norris. Patrick Norris did not attend the March on Bloody Sunday. Patrick Norris was not even in Mount Royal Street, and Patrick Norris was not even arrested in Glenfadda Park North with any of the other prisoners. Patrick Norris was a taxi driver, and he had been driving into the Bogside to pick up a fare when his vehicle was stopped in William Street. He said that he had no dealings at all with Soldier F until Soldier F picked him as one of the four that he was taking responsibility for, and and Soldier F made a statement alleging that he had been throwing stones in William Street. Another individual who was arrested was Mr. Joe McColgan. Mr. McColgan wasn't in the Bogside during the time of the shootings either. He was in fact working in Altnakelvin Hospital, and he had a clock out card to prove it that he was not he could not have been rioting at the time where the minor riots were taking place in uh, in the area of Little James Street and William Street. He had only just come into the area of the Bogside when he was stopped by a paratrooper and told to get on to a soft skin vehicle. He thought he was just going to be screened, but he was picked out by a para, and all these people, I should say, were charged with riotous behaviour. You'll know that at that time, riotous behaviour carried a mandatory sentence of 6 months in custody. And I think it's instructive of the fact that this routine practice of making statements against sworn statements against members of the local population were being entertained by the RUC, and they were going to be relied upon um, uh, as an effort to try and secure convictions for rioting against local people on Bloody Sunday. These prosecutions were all eventually dropped in August of 72. Uh, and all charges against the people who were arrested were eventually pulled, as it were. Now, Soldier F will face no charge and faces no charge in relation to any of the beatings, the torture, the attempt to pervert the course of justice, uh, or any of that criminality in addition to the killings and attempted murders that he's also escaped justice for to date. Um, so I'd say that's a very broad brush, John, but hopefully it gives you a decent flavour of the evidence that was there. I think
Well,
it's important to say as well that the much of the statements in terms of the Royal Military Police will statements that were taken, the evidence that was given, the oral evidence that was given to Lord Widgery, the oral evidence that was given to uh, Lord Saville and his colleagues is not admissible in the criminal trial against Soldier F. Now, when Soldier F gave his oral evidence at the Widgery inquiry, the initial statements, such as the Royal Military Police statement that I was able to that I read out to you there, or I summarised for you, in a couple of lines, really, all of that material was not, none of it was disclosed to the lawyers acting for the families or the wounded, who could have deployed that material to great effect when, for example, when cross-examining F in respect of the statement that he eventually gave to the Treasury Solicitors Department on the 19th of February. In fact, the statement that he gave to the Treasury Solicitor on the 19th of February, that's the only statement that the lawyers for the families would have seen back in 72. So when I said that the Widgery inquiry was a whitewash, it was not only a whitewash, it was it was procedurally unfair and substantively corrupt. Is how they, is how we, I think that was the words that we used when we characterised it in our closings to Lord Saville. Um, so that is a decent summary of, well, I hope it's a decent summary of what he did in Derry on Bloody Sunday. And when he gave evidence at the Bloody Sunday inquiry, he said that he had now forgotten everything that had happened on Bloody Sunday. He remembers going to Derry. He remembers eating his lunch. He didn't remember being in Fort George with the prisoners. He knew he discharged his weapon on Bloody Sunday, but he did not know when, where, or why he fired it. Interestingly, Seamus Tracy, who was the senior counsel instructed by myself, asked Soldier F if, after this inquiry concludes, you are to face charges of murder, are you going to maintain that you have no memory of when, where, or why you fired your weapon? Will that be your defence if you're ever charged with criminal offences? And he said he didn't know. Obviously, he wasn't charged with any criminal offences at that time, and he probably believed he never would have been, even even at that stage. Um, an incident occurred on the 3rd of February in Belfast, which involved the anti-tank platoon on the Lower Falls. Two members of the Legion of Mary, um, the Catholic organization, Catholic Church organization, were at a meeting in the Davis area of Belfast, and they were picked up by um, Soldier 036, a radio operator, um, Private 027, Lieutenant 119, and soldiers E, F, G, and H. Now, both both men uh, had a horrendous experience at the horrendous experience at the hands of the anti-tank platoon. They were beaten. One of them had a gun placed in his mouth, and the trigger pulled. Um, they were kicked severely. They were kidnapped effectively and driven to the Shankill Road. Um, which is quite close to the Lower Falls, and they were taken to um, a a bar, the Horseshoe Bar, where they had been dumped. But before they were dumped, a crowd of locals were spoken to by the parachute regiment soldiers who brought them there, and they told them that these are IRA men. When the crowd, spoke to the two battered and bloodied Legion of Mary workers, they explained that they were church workers, and this seemed to satisfy the this particular group of locals. However, as they tried to walk their way off the Shankill Road, they were then attacked at another bar. And I think they were just lucky that they didn't that no weapons were available, or I think it's highly likely that they would have been victims of they both would have been sectarian murder victims. Now, all of this was carried in the Irish News of the 4th of January. We're talking days after Bloody Sunday. And it received a particular level of media um, attention. And both men made High Court, both they issued writs for their false imprisonment and the assault that were carried out in relation to them. Um, they received substantial damages by the Ministry of Defence, who settled both claims. The members of although we did not receive the full papers from the Ministry of Defence during the Bloody Sunday inquiry, it's clear that an investigation of sorts, at least for that, had been carried out, and that the paratroopers who dealt with them said that they were found in possession of pro-IRA literature, that they were taken away for screening, which they were not, and that they said that they wanted dropped off where they were dropped off, which is beyond ludicrous, given given how dangerous it would have been for any Catholic in those days to have been found on the Shankill, effectively behind on the other side of the peace line, if it was even erected properly at that stage. But in addition to that, what we also know about Soldier F is that in September of 1972, he was deployed with the radio operator 027. They were, suppose it's a bit uncanny, two Protestants who had the same surnames as two of those who lost their lives after Bloody Sunday, McKinney and Johnson, Richie McKinney and Robert Johnson, were both shot dead by the parachute regiment, specifically Soldier F, had killed them with Soldier 027, claiming that both were gunmen, um, in the same way that the other killings had all been justified. And no, there was no military investigation of that. There was no police investigation of any of that. So it's hard to say how many, by the time he finished his tour in Northern Ireland, how many people he actually was responsible for killing, because we simply don't know. And one thing that seems absolutely beyond doubt is that he fired more rounds than his 13 rounds that he admitted firing. because many of the soldiers would the practice had developed whereby when soldiers were on the firing ranges, they would keep a couple of rounds each time that they would go and have them in their pockets so that they could discharge extra rounds and they would not have to justify them. Not that they had to justify what they did very much as things were, but people would have been able to, for example, not even make a statement to the Royal Military Police because after the shooting had finished and people checked how many rounds they fired, well, that particular soldier would be sitting with his two magazines of 20 and his standard bandolier of 10 because each before deploying each soldier would bring 50 rounds as part of his kit. So I think that's a reasonable summary of what we know about soldier uh, F's activities on that tour. He went on then to serve in. He was seconded then to um, specialist units within the British Army. None of this affected his career advancement or the trajectory of his promotion. He retired after like 22 years service um, at a warrant officer's second class, which is as high as one can go as a non-commissioned officer in the British Army. So Bloody Sunday in no way hampered his military career. And then, we're aware of what he did after he was in the Bloody Sunday. Sorry, after he left the British Army. We we're aware of some of that as well, which I would, which I don't propose to go into.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so given everything you've trawled through and you've had years to think about and so on, do you think that that his actions, his shooting more specifically, was that done with like orders beforehand to go in and do something, or do you think it could be a case of kind of, we'll say, kind of losing the head, which wouldn't excuse it at all. It would still be inexcusable, but it would be a different thing than acting on orders.
Do you mean, is it sort of cock up theory, cock up versus conspiracy theory?
Um,
Um,
Maybe not cock up, but like in these situations with huge crowds and a lot going on,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
things can happen.
Well,
Again, wouldn't excuse it, but it would be different from acting from orders from your superiors.
no, no, I have heard some of the military people that you have interviewed on your podcast try and say, well, one doesn't know what one would do. We only have a split second in order to make up in order to make that decision. I personally think it is nonsense. Lord Saville uh, was at pains in his conclusions, and we're talking about coming from a British law lord here, that none of these shots on Bloody Sunday, none of them were fired in fear or in a state of confusion. They were not being attacked. Um, I think it's most instructive that when when some soldiers were saying they were encountering the biggest paramilitary onslaught of the Troubles, if they were to be believed, if they were to be believed, but Sergeant K is putting his rifle back on safe after he takes his one shot at Kevin McElhinney as he's crawling to the door of the Roswell Flats. The the photographs and the footage bear testament to the fact that this is all one-way traffic. This is like shooting. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. On, I believe that there was a plan within a plan. I think that, and we never got to the bottom of it, but the night before Bloody Sunday, um, a plane landed from Cyprus, which contained Private J and Sergeant O. Now, Sergeant O was a Glasgow loyalist. He was 10 years in the British Army. He's recently deceased. He was 10 years in the Parachute Regiment, had served in Aden, etc. He was a very forceful uh, personality, as some some of these individuals were. Now, he and Jay came back on a plane, just the two of them. They were brought back from Cyprus the night before bloody Sunday, and they went down just simply to Derry. Then the next morning, I find that very very strange that that would happen, and it was never ever properly explained. Um, Another thing that you can see is there amongst, if you see the colour footage on of the events on Bloody Sunday, you will see a small number of the soldiers have got very, very washed out smocks, to the extent that they're almost, the camouflage is, you can still see it, but it's faded very, very significantly. These soldiers tend to be shooters on Bloody Sunday. Again, this was something that we never ever got to the bottom of, but we asked the tribunal to take judicial notice of it. Um, I'm aware of I think it's by a book that you mentioned it to me before, in a conversation, I think the um, before today, when we were in contact. I think it was written by an author called Burke,
I did.
who,
It's
yeah,
behind me somewhere.
you have it there, you have it in the collection there. But he talks about Colonel Wilford going and speaking specifically whilst in the Presbyterian Church to soldier F and H. Now, I do not for a second believe that Soldier H would have been party to a plan within a plan. Soldier H fired more admitted rounds on Bloody Sunday than any other paratrooper. But if one, but one could see very very easily that he was not the type of individual that you would entrust information like that to. Soldier F, by all accounts, barely tolerated him. One could see the complete difference in personality between both individuals. Now, if David Burke was to say soldiers F and G were spoken to, um, and that it was or soldiers potentially, I never saw, none of us did. So Corporal E, he was part of the anti-tank brick, whether or not, but I understand that he was not in. He was no dozer either of in terms of a soldier, but Soldier H, who his account was, I mean, as ridiculous as Soldier F's account attempts to justify what he did. Soldier H's were off the chart altogether. He said that he there was a van with an M1 carbine um, in Glenfarra Park, north, and he had been firing his weapon at the Paris. Now, none of the other Paris say that they saw this, but he says that he fired an aim shot at him, and the gunman moved away from the frosted window in the bathroom, and he gathered himself, and then he went and he got back up, and so soldier H fired another round at him with his M1 carbine, and the man fell away from the window, and he came back 19 times. That um that sequence of events, according to soldier H, does that occur on his account. And on the 19th shot, he hits him and he falls away wounded from the frosted window. Now, no frosted windows were broken in Glenfarra Park on Bloody Sunday. Even within the parachute regiment, there is no doubt because we have got interviews from them, for example, when they're being spoken to by Praxis, which was a TV company, which I think the drink was taken and what have you, the assistant getting soldiers that bit more talkative, what have you. And all of them, to a man, refer to how much of an idiot soldier H was, but it's not to say he wasn't a thug. I mean, what he clearly did was once he saw soldiers F and G and J and P going in to do what they were doing for whatever reason they were doing it, he enthusiastically simply joined in. And I think that that's the case with many of them. Soldier O, he fires a very large amount of rounds at the rear of the Roswell Flats, and the mortar platoon, many of them join in with him once they see him firing. So I do believe that there was a plan within a plan. I think it was kept within a tight, trusted group who would never break. Who not that they were subjected to anything like 7 days in Castlereagh and like I mean it was tea and buns, really. The circumstances in which they provided their evidence. So don't would be interesting to see how they would have done, with the 7 days in Castlereagh and all and everything that went with that, or Strand Road. But I mean, they were dealing with the SIB part of the RMP, the Special Investigations Branch, and most of, I mean, Soldier 027 says that the exercise was a bit of a joke, and they were all like drawing lines, like laughing and joking about their trajectories. Some of it going through walls of buildings and stuff together. They were just who cares? And um, but I think that whilst the soldiers knew to treat the Royal Military Police investigations as a joke, and that's what they were. I still think that there were a number of soldiers there who there's no other credible logical reason for them to have done what they have done in concert as they did it if there was no plan within a plan, because they weren't being attacked. If they were, you could you could look at it another way. Um, by That's not to say no rounds were fired at them. A tiny amount were, but apart from the drain pipe shot, which I set out for you at the start, none of that's the only round which actually was fired at them that they were aware was fired at them. And in no way could that round be said to justify what happened in Glenfarra Park, what happened in Boston Street. It can't justify Jim Ray being executed from a range of, if I'm 18 inches. By Soldier G coming back in from Glenfarra. Park got another one about the ones that he got in Abbey Park. So I think that there's, and these things don't have to be written down either. You know, certain soldiers know just what's expected of them, and things are done on a nod and a wink, and I think that these soldiers enjoyed it. Certainly, all the accounts of how they behaved afterwards talk about them being jubilant. The accounts that came from the morgue, uh, from the uh, from the civilians in Alton Calvin Hospital when they came over there, because three of the deceased, the three young boys who were shot dead at the rubble barricade, Nash, McDade, and Young, they were thrown in. They were thrown into the mortar platoon pig on top of each other. There's evidence that John Young was still alive and that the other two bodies may have smothered him. But when these bodies were removed at A&E and at the morgue with and the paras were laughing and joking and amongst themselves, and this distressed the staff and uh, the relatives of the deceased very, very much. Um, just that the blasé and that, there's just the cruel indifference of them to the people that they had killed. Um, I listened to Johnny Adair saying, "Let's face it, we surely were shot at by gunmen. There was gunmen there." I mean, I know empty vessels can make the most noise, but if you would only look at if you would only look at the the evidence that's there, I don't think that he would come out with a statement that that he such an offensive, moronic statement that he did. He should just look at the evidence and before he comes out with things like things like that. Um, well, it'll be interesting to see whether they obviously we are not mounting the prosecution that's taken by the Public Prosecution Service. The families have had a very unhappy relationship with the PPS uh, and the PSNI, who were tasked with investigating this case. In June in 2010, when the David Cameron said it was unjustified and unjustifiable, that the innocence of all the people that were murdered and the people who were shot was declared. It took Madden Finucane, Peter Madden, to write to the chief constable of the PSNI and say, "What do you intend to do about this?" And it was almost like, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, you have a tribunal of inquiry stating forcefully that you have got 14 people who've been killed without, couldn't use words like murder, etc., in a public inquiry, but you have people killed without justification who were not gunmen or bombers. There were no gunmen or bombers beside them. The shots were fired without justification. They were not fired in moments of fear. Your question earlier. They were not fired, in circumstances of distress. I think with the one exception of one soldier, um, are you starting a murder investigation now? And it took them a while to come back to us and says, "Well, Yes, in light of our obligations on the Human Rights Act, and et cetera, et cetera. Yes, there will be a PSNI investigation, but it was as clear as daylight that it had not dawned on them that this was now incumbent on them to do. Then, within 3 years or so of that occurring, the PSNI write to the relatives and ourselves, and they say that the uh, police investigation side is going to have to be shelved because of cuts to our budget. And we said, try that one in court. And we issued pre-proceedings correspondence with a view to lodging a judicial review challenge to the decision to effectively dump the Bloody Sunday murder investigation because of money. And that soon was reinstated when they received legal advice, and that's an untenable position. I mean, it's something that can't be done. That you like for financial reasons or budgetary reasons, you simply decide not to investigate murders, which are undoubtedly murders. And I mean, the families see the hypocrisy. For example, when obviously they're tragic events, but in the wake of the Michael Stone attacks on the Gibraltar three funerals, and two undercover soldiers were accosted from their cars, beaten savagely, and executed by the IRA. There was no, there was no slowness about arresting 200 people for, in relation to murder, and bringing 43 of them before the courts for offensive murder, kidnap, grievous bodily harm, murder as a joint enterprise. For all these people here, the Bloody Sunday families having to fight every step of the way. Um, once the PSNI file went into the Public Prosecution Service in 2019, the Public Prosecution Service say, well, none of the paras are going to be prosecuted for what they've done, with the one exception of Soldier F. And he's only going to face prosecution for this fraction of his criminality, that the killings within Glenfada Park. We challenged that. We challenged that decision by way of judicial review, and we were unsuccessful in that challenge. Then 4 years ago, almost to the well, just a few days ago, but 4 years ago, without consultation with the Bloody Sunday families, the Public Prosecution Service announced that they're going to drop all charges against Soldier F, on the basis that in a similar prosecution for again against the former paratrooper for the murder of the official IRA leader in Belfast, Joe McCann, at the start of the Troubles, 1972. He was chased through the markets area, shot in the back. It all sounds familiar. And Because of the Royal Military Police statements and the circumstances in which they were told that they were taken, there had been a court ruling that prosecution must fall, and that they said, well, applying that ruling to Bloody Sunday, well, we're going to have to drop the charges against Soldier F. And they were comparing apples with oranges. And we initiated a with some of the cream of the Northern Ireland Bar who came in to assist right away. The families, a lot of these people who were during the Bloody Sunday inquiry were junior counsel, are now senior counsel and judges, and they're still doing this case like myself 20 odd years later. I mean, I look there at a letter that I wrote to the Garda Commissioner in 1999 seeking the IRA bug tape when I was ignored, and I'm looking at a letter that I wrote 26 years ago on behalf of these clients, and when I was a nipper, and uh, and many of the barristers are now more grizzled and a few pounds heavier, and but a lot more experienced, and the prosecution was reinstated. It's been 4 years to the day since Joe McKinney, Willie McKinney's brother, gave a speech in Derry's Guildhall saying that this case would be fought, that this was not the end of it, that Soldier F had not gotten off, and here we are, 2 months away from seeing him in court,
On that
charged with the murders.
On that note, actually, okay, like obviously this happened in the early 70s. Soldier F he's gotten to live out most of his the vast majority of his life in freedom. Given that he's now an older man, certainly, what for you would be like justice served on this, given that the real justice would have been him spending his life behind bars, but now he's older. Yeah, tell me, do you think there's utility in locking up an old man, for rightfully so for murder? But yeah, what is like what does justice look like in a case like this for you?
Well, I think it's really just about applying the law. I mean, there shouldn't be a law for, um, well, there's no law for, really that the British Army faced for many years, and certainly for those first 4 years of the conflict, when that agreement was in place, which was expressly deprecated by the Lord Chief Justice Lord Lowry in 1974 in a case called Foxford, whereby soldiers were protected from scrutiny, any form of scrutiny, really, any form of independent scrutiny. And that's when almost 200 Irish civilians were killed at the hands of them. And they say, "Oh, well, the IRA there's been an amnesty for the IRA and all this, and now they're trying to persecute veterans." It's nonsense. Veterans have never felt the wrath, not the wrath. They have never, they have never been treated equally as, in the sense that when if they were committing murders, they weren't investigated for it. I mean, you talk about Ian Thane, Fisher and Wright, Lee Clegg. Can you think of any more? Soldiers who were prosecuted
Um,
for shooting Irish people who served, who ever served more than 4 years in custody. I can't. They, I mean, they have never faced equally the the penalties that are there. under the law. There is no persecution of their veterans. I mean, war criminals were pursued into their 90s by by many governments around the world in relation to uh, I mean, you name it. Not people from the Nazi administration and the SS um, and Bosnia. Like one can point to many instances, but it's not up to me. It's up to the families, really, is what in terms of what justice they see as appropriate. But knowing them as I know them, I think that all the families would want to see is that they are pursued the same as ex-combatants from the troubles. Like I mean, only couple of months, well, about 6, 8 months ago, we seen Martin Macaulay, a Republican from Lurgan, extradited in respect of the Kennigo embankment bomb in 1982, which set off the RUC on a 6-week murder spree in which they murdered five Republicans, members of the IRA and INLA, all of whom were unarmed, and a totally innocent civilian, another young boy, another young 17-year-old boy, and most of these victims were 17 years of age. They were children. Um, None of the RUC E4A officers are charged with the murders of Gervais McCare, Eugene Toman, Sean Burns, Roddy Carroll, you know, uh, Seamus Grew, Michael Ty, but we see Martin McCoy being prosecuted the uh, for detonating the bomb, which a heavily armed RUC patrol were blown up, killed outright. Um, he's been extradited up. He's been bailed. Very heavy conditions. Now, if convicted, he stands to serve 2 years in custody. I mean, if the law now, as the law stands, the British Army did not qualify under the Northern Ireland Sentences Act um, for early release if they were to be convicted of criminal offences because they did not seek to be included in the Good Friday Agreement negotiations because that's really something in their view which was set up for terrorists. But now, when there's a prospect of a handful of their killers facing justice, it's like there's a mass panic at the thoughts of them going to jail. And even if they did go to jail, there's absolute if convicted of murder and he did go to jail. Well, I mean, there was an attempt under the Legacy Act to unlawfully end all prosecutions of all members of the British military. I mean, have you ever heard anything like it? Um, Quite rightfully, the courts have stepped at it and it's completely unlawful. I mean, did you ever think if we were going to say anything else? Um, but I mean, I have no doubt that the royal prerogative of mercy would be extended to Soldier F, and the families are in no doubt that if convicted, he certainly will not do a day more in jail than Martin Macaulay if convicted, will, or John Downey, who's being prosecuted now before the courts in relation to a 1973, I believe, explosion, 72 or 73, um, a landmine attack on a heavily armed British Army um, unit. What's what's the difference between Martin McCauley and John Downey and Soldier F? Especially when one considers the type of criminality, unrelenting criminality that he was involved in that tour, what he did in Derry that day, how it did not even knock him out of his stride, and they going to kidnap two members of the Legion of Mary and put and torture them and to put them through what they and to dump them. I mean, how cowardly and vicious and twisted an act can you think of to leave people on the Shankill Road at that time and to say there they are, there are two members of the IRA for you, work away. It's appalling.
On that note, if it, fair enough. If you wouldn't want to give any predictions, but let's just say you had to bet the house on what outcome is going to befall Soldier F in his trial. What would you say?
Let's just say the manner in which this case has been prosecuted, if it was to be compared to the way in which the family's case was put forward and defended by ourselves and by Peter Madden, in particular, Arthur Harvey, Seamus Tracy, Barry McDonald, Eilish McDermott, Michael Mansfield, and people that who put their heart and soul into establishing the truth on Bloody Sunday and effectively prosecuting the parachute regiment and their politicians before Lord Saville. That's really what it ended up being. I see I see nothing even remotely resembling the same vigor and the same conviction in terms of what they're doing in this prosecution of F. They have had to be harried and challenged and taken to court and threatened with more judicial reviews and bringing them to court, winning in court, again and again. And it's just been a constantly uphill struggle. So, I mean, if he's convicted, so be it. Um, um, but I'll wait and I'll see. I wouldn't be, certainly, it's, I'm hopeful, but by no means confident.
Very good. Thank you now for everything. Amazing level of thoroughness and detail you went into for us. On that note, anything to leave us with before we wrap up?
I think, um, we managed to get the IRA bug tape eventually back in 2000, 2001. A local editor of the Derry Journal. I obviously had started writing for it to the Garda Síochána commissioner was ignored. The Republican movement then produced the original tape, God, wherever they got it, I don't know. But Eamon McDermott and I think possibly with one other person went down and met who they met and brought the tape up. And I would like your viewers to, and I know you're going to listen, are going to play the audio part of that recording for them. And I think that when you hear the soldiers, officers speaking about Yeah, about them pulling stiffs out of the Roswell. Oh, yeah, well that's good. No, I'm sorry, it's not. It's not. It's not fucking good. They've shot the wrong fucking people. And the paratroopers are still in Roswell Street. They have not left. They've not left. And then it says, uh, that the one officer says to the officer, "Well, Ford was there, and Mount, Captain Mount." And said, "Oh yeah, yeah, Ford was there, was he?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, "He was lapping it up." He says, "He was lapping it up." He says, "Yeah, look at them, $24 million. This is how it should be done." That is a gives a snapshot into the real attitude that was exhibited, and shared and spoken about, in normal terms, as if that was a normal thing. The other person on the engaged in the conversation is saying, "Oh my God, are you serious?" He expressed no shock at all. What he's saying is, "Oh God, well Ford, he's down here, he's absolutely laughing it up. Oh, the Padre is a bit upset about all the ill treatment." Well, I'm sure he was, but I remember Eilish McDermott asking, uh, Robert Ford, "Well, where were you, General Ford? Were you lapping it up?" And it was very, very uncomfortable, uh, experience for him, not for us. But I think if you listen to that, and if you look at the interviews with the soldiers, and there was a This Week documentary taken, where the paras were interviewed in the sergeant's mess, and they were all drinking pints and laughing about a job well done, etc., the week after Bloody Sunday, and the interviews with the paras the week after the Ballymurphy massacre. You know, that shows you exactly the attitude that was there. There was this arrogance towards other soldiers. There was a sense of, they talk about, "We've been in the depot for 6 months, we're trained to be killers, and then they bring us over here and we have to try and act like Mr. Nice." And when we finally, everybody got to let off rounds, it was fucking great. You know, when you see that, and when you see the soldiers saying that, from their own mouths, I mean, I think if we're going to look at the past, we'll have to look at what way people really believed, and the attitudes that people really had, and the attitudes to life and to taking life that permeated right through the British Army, and start to be honest about it. You know, I think once that happens, we'll all move forward a lot easier.
Somebody has Phillips here. What does he want? I don't know. What does he want? Look, there's obviously been a hell of a sort out. The whole thing's in chaos. Yeah, obviously. I think it's gone badly wrong in the hospitals. The doctor's just been up to the hospital, and they're pulling the ships out there as fast as they can get them out. There's nothing wrong with that, Helen. Well, there is, because they're the wrong people. There are about between 9 and 15 killed by the paratroopers in the Rossford area. They're old women, children, fuck knows what, and they're still going up there. I mean, their pigs are just full of bodies. There's a tree coming up there with bodies in. Yeah, we saw it. Tips all over the place. And Mount. Mount's involved, is he? Well, Mount was down there, yeah. Yeah. Well, but the Padre's been upset, and he's going up to see the commander about all the ill treatment. General Ford? Yeah. He was laughing at that. Who was it? Ford. Was he? Yeah. He was addressing the team for a long time. Interesting, isn't it? Well done, he said, "Look at them, 24 nailed on." Good, excellent. And he said, this is what should happen. Yeah. He said, "We're far too passive, and I'll kill you later." Yeah, okay. Bye-bye. Ciao. yes.
Oh, sorry, Bobby. Max Hastings at BBC.
Max, are you here around?
Very much so, yes. I was just going to ask what the latest score was.
Yeah, we're just referring anyway off to Northern Ireland now. Who are working out.
Well, I wasn't so much. The latest score, I don't mean just how many have been killed. Instead, how many soldiers have been killed?
None.
No soldiers?
No.
All civilian casualties?
Yeah.
What is the present situation on the bog side as far as you know it?
So I don't know at this moment.
Yeah. Are the parachute regiments still in there?
Oh, no, they're only in for a short while.
Yeah.
Short, devastating moment.
Yeah.
No, all is quiet now in the box side.
All is quiet now?
Yeah.
And there's been no shooting for, several hours?
That's true.
Well. And what is they're still sort of holding the line, William Street and all the rest of it, or they even pulled off there?
Oh, I think that's all come down now.
All come down?
Let me just check a moment, Max. Just hang on a moment. Max, the troops are all withdrawing to their normal Londonderry deployments.
Yeah.
The reserve forces have been now withdrawn.
Yeah.
And there have been no incidents in the last couple of hours.
No incidents for 2 hours?
That's right.
Is there any... You say that Northern Ireland's working out all the details of how all these people would...
Northern Ireland, depending on the place talk.
Yeah.
I've just been ringing up Northern Ireland. I'm from there.
Yeah.
Just ringing up saying, hey, what's happening? Because we were referring everybody along there, and I was interested to know what sort of answer they're getting.
Well. And the bog side, as far as you know, is quotes quiet, unquote.
Correct.
Good call.
All right. How long are you here for, Max?
Several weeks, I'm afraid. But we're just trying to get an interview with your General Ford for tomorrow.
Yeah, we were on the site today.
Yes, we were, but we've now returned to Belfast.
You're in Belfast now?
Yeah. But we may have to come back to Derry if also was carry on shooting people at a remarkable rate.
Well, yes, I'm from Belfast myself, and I think it's entirely a good trend myself.
Well, it's something I would have thought that the bog side might take a relative view, but
yeah.
Anyway, many thanks.
Okay, mate.
All right there.
Goodbye.
Bye.